they would be somewhat elongated.
So Lockie, I thought we could start today with something we've never talked about or tried, which is a guided meditation. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So come into a comfortable seated posture as you are. And I think we should close our eyes. And for everybody listening, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if you know how to meditate, just let go of that. We're not going to try and do anything right now. The great meditation teacher Mingyur Rinpoche says, the best type of meditation is no meditation. So if you're a meditator or not a meditator, you're in the same position. There's no benefit to knowing how to meditate. And I first just want to begin by expressing my compassion to you, Lockie, and everybody listening. We live in a world where productivity is demanded. You need to be productive, or at least give off the appearance of being productive, in order to survive, in order to make ends meet, to just survive in this world. We need to be constantly engaged and productive. You know, even what you do on the weekend. You know, one of your colleagues is going to ask you, "What'd you do on the weekend?" And you better have a good story about what you did. And you might want to upload that to Instagram or whatever. So even when we're off, we're on. And our minds adapt to that, you know. We have a pandemic of sitting, or an epidemic of sitting. And so what that means is that our hip flexors are constantly under tension, and the body adapts, you know, and it's trying to help you. So the body says, okay, well, if your hip flexors are always tense, let me just flex them for you. And so they become chronically flexed. And in this world of incessant productivity, our minds are always on. And so the mind responds by saying, okay, I'm always going to be on. And it becomes very difficult for us to simply be in the moment and to let go. So what I want to do is take us into a place where we're naturally letting go. And oftentimes this happens in places of extreme physical exertion. So you can imagine that you've climbed up to the top of a mountain and it's taken you hours and you're incredibly sore and exhausted. And you reach the summit, there's an amazing view, and finally you get to sit down and you go, you just get to let go. So I will encourage everybody, and you, Lockie, to just take a deep breath in through your nose into the stomach. And as you let go, make that noise. Just relax. And do that a couple more times in your own time. And just allow that feeling to expand through your body. And just let go of the tension in your body and in your mind. It's funny, you know, with these tight hip flexors and tight ankles, it makes it difficult for us to get into a perfect squat. That's quite a feat if an adult can do that. But just if you think about a baby, I mean, those guys will just drop into a squat, pick something up and drop and go right back up into standing. So we've lost ranges of motion that were natively there, and we've done so with our minds as well. Just again, think about a baby, how its eyes are wide open and its mind is wide open, and it's taking everything in and not judging, just wanting to know, so curious. So natively we have that ability to simply take in without judging and to be entirely engrossed in the present moment. That never leaves us. And so in the same way that one can stretch to recover ranges of motion and do mobility work, what we're going to do now is we're going to recover the mental ranges of motion that we had when we were children, and to simply take in the present moment without judging it. And so I'm going to ask you a question, and I don't want you to respond with words. When a baby looks out into the world inquisitively, it's not looking for a linguistic answer. It accepts whatever comes up as being the answer. So we're gonna see what comes up for us when this question is asked, without needing to answer it literally, but just seeing what happens. And so as I ask you this question, you might think about how instead of looking for something, instead of directing your attention, let's say forward, that your vision is very wide, as if you're taking in the periphery and imagining that you could take in almost what's going on behind you as well. Your vision is so wide that it takes in everything in all directions. And if it helps, you can think about looking back through your head to the world behind you. So in this place of openness, the question is, what is here now when there's no problem to solve? So just see, when there's nowhere to go and nothing to do, what's here? What is this? Who is aware? And from here, notice the qualities that show up, the vast expanse, the space for everything, the warmth and compassion. Notice what qualities show up and how those contrast to the qualities of a mind that's engaged constantly with productivity. What's here now when there's no problem to solve? So just feeling whatever comes up for you. Again, we're not trying to let anything happen. In fact, we're doing the exact opposite. We're trying not to try. We're simply letting go. And so you can return to this place of anytime you want to. And I think what you'll find is that it brings a quality of amazing presence that you had when you were a child. It's never lost, can always be recovered at any moment when you want it to be. And just think about how differently you act as a person in this mode, rather than the mode of got to do this, got to do that. So in your own time, coming back into the world in whichever way you'd like to show up. And Lockie, I'll just ask you in your own time to respond in whichever way you'd like.
When you said, there's what do you feel in this moment when there's nothing to do? I thought of beauty,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought of comfort. Yeah, because I thought, if there's nothing to do, then let's just enjoy the surroundings. And I think you can see beauty in everything. And not even just see, but maybe hear it and feel it as well. Yeah. And then the comfort was, I just feel very comfortable. You know, like almost I feel nothing, and that is a comfortable thing. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how when we remove everything, the default position is not boredom, but beauty or comfort, warmth?
Yeah. Is that consistent amongst everyone, do you think?
I think so. I think that if only you let go and see what's already here, what you'll find on the other side is not blankness. In Advaita Vedanta, so the path of non-duality, we call consciousness as having three qualities. Sat, Chit, and Ananda, which are existence, consciousness, and bliss. So that we feel that things are happening, so there's an existence, and we have an experience of those things happening. That's consciousness. And wonderfully, in this place, in this default place of there being nothing going on, it's somehow rapturous and blissful. You had a spontaneous calling back to a feeling of beauty and comfort. I did not mention any of that. When we let go of everything and just see what's here, what we find on the other side is bliss. So that sometimes when we think about equanimity, it seems like, well, what a boring life, to not feel anything. And actually, on the other side of peace is joy. That you don't need to be motivated by a drive to get anywhere to feel bliss. And that, as I mentioned, if you just at any moment, you can give that to yourself. If you just and this is the consciousness that a child has when it sees a bubble and is totally enraptured with it, or just laughs for no reason whatsoever. That childlike consciousness is somehow by default gorgeous, beautiful, warm, open, joyful. That when we remove, what we find is that it's not blank or white or clear or nothingness, but that nothingness itself has a character, and that wonderfully that character is bliss.
Yeah, I actually felt that recently with my brother's daughter, who's not quite 2 yet.
So did I.
Yeah, she'd point to the Christmas tree lights, and she'd point to another sort of Christmassy light, and she just was like, loved it, and it just made me really happy. The really simple things.
Yes.
And what else did we do? Even like if I jump really high, she'd kind of smile, and yeah, I loved it. And I do think like I'd like to be like that. Like, the smallest things genuinely make you find amusing or fun.
Mm-hmm.
And also, and the genuineness of that, not, whatever she's expressing is real. It's not, she's trying
no agenda.
Yeah, exactly. So,
So, I just want to reiterate that is, you are there now, and it can be recovered at any time. It does not require a 7-day water-only fast. It doesn't require 10 years of meditation, months of living in a cave, or it doesn't require pharmaceutical help, psychedelics, or anything. That is a native state of being that is there, that is cannot be destroyed, and is always there without the need for training and without the need for anything external, and can be always accessed at any moment when you remember that you'd like to be there. So you can choose to give yourself a little gift, and as we talked about, I think in the last episode, sometimes it can feel selfish to give yourself a little gift, but just imagine how different your interactions are going to be with other people when you operate from this place. As you said, there's a certain level of deep authenticity and honesty that comes from somebody who embraces the world without an agenda, faces it for what it is. And again, it's incredible that in that native state, it isn't a state of fear. You might think that if I let go of everything that makes me an adult, all of that stuff is keeping me safe. So what happens if I let go of it? And what you find on the other side is actually that you can engage with the world with a different kind of wisdom, a natural wisdom that is always there, cannot be destroyed, has enough space for everything. In this space, Lockie, all emotions are okay. They come up and there's enough space. There's enough space for fear. There's enough space for guilt. There's enough space for anger. There's enough space for happiness. None of your emotions are rejected. They're all embraced, as if you were being, I sometimes call it, your eternal grandmother is embracing you. It feels like on the other side, this default position of just seeing what's here, somehow the universe embraces you. It's really remarkable. So you can embody that and become that for yourself and all beings, if you would like. It just takes remembering and then choosing.
That's beautiful, man. So it's almost like your base default state is a blissful one.
I believe that all of ours is.
Yeah.
Not just mine.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was meaning generally, yeah. That's a comforting thought as well. And I think it sets a default positivity that you can exude into the world.
You can. You don't need to pay anything to get it. It's freely here for you. When you were born, you were given this gift. And anytime you want to, you can return. Let me ask, have you spent much time in meditation before?
No, not really.
So this could have been a failed experiment. We could have done this and it could have led nowhere. But I believe that it's revealed whenever it needs to be. It's always there. And it doesn't require, in fact, it requires the opposite of what you think. You might think that it requires training and it requires addition. And actually it requires subtraction. It requires the courage to let all of that go. And once you pass the precipice, as you mentioned, it's just beautiful. Beauty and warmth is on the other end. So, it sometimes seems, good, I was going to ask you to open your eyes. It sometimes seems that in meditation, we're in a special state because we're closing our eyes and we're sitting in a certain way. And what I'd like you and the listeners to potentially experiment with is the idea that there's nothing different between closing your eyes and sitting on a meditation cushion. That when you open your eyes and you let the world in, the world is coming into that same place that has this default bliss. So that there need not be a difference between what happens on the meditation cushion and what happens when you're in a meeting, and what happens when you're getting your groceries, and what happens when you're working out at the gym. And it all comes through this consciousness that by default is rapturous and blissful. I'm glad this wasn't a failed experiment.
Yeah, I had no idea about this. That's how I like it sometimes, though, the surprise aspect. I also think it means it's very genuine and not premeditated, no pun intended.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's cool to think now. I think more and more I appreciate the beauty of nature, and not even nature, like man-made buildings and whatnot.
Yes.
Just quite often in a day, I'll notice, you know, like sunsets are pretty obvious. They're quite beautiful and, you know, different. They're always different. We were talking about the moon previously. I just enjoy looking at the moon. Like a moonlit night, I love looking at, you know, the landscape. And then like it's Christmas time, so yeah, all the little cute things people do. They, you know, they put lights on trees, or they put tinsel in public places, and even like my housemate putting a little Santa hat on his robot vacuum, so when it goes around, it's wearing a Santa hat. All these things I just I've been enjoying and appreciating, and it kind of feels in line with that, where you're just, it's very simple, and you're just enjoying what's in front of you. Yeah, and there's no agenda or intention of like doing something. They're always enjoyable moments, and maybe I think it's nice when you can share that with people, you know. So if I'm with someone, I might mention, oh, how beautiful is that, or maybe I'll take a photo and send it to someone. But I feel like it's in line with what we just did then, to like have you got a name for that place or something, or the here?
Yeah, so that's today's topic, here. Here. It's interesting because I think that, so there are a lot of books that have been read about meditation, and I've certainly read my fair few, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts on it. And my feeling is that I think all of them would agree that that place is not labelable. As I mentioned, I think in order to get there, you need to go to that place where when you were a child and you were inquisitive, you didn't look for linguistic types of answers. So that sometimes it's called non-duality, that the subject-object distinction is broken, and that there's just here and now. There's no distinction between here and there. There's just here. So for me, in my own meditation journey, because I've been a meditator for over 10 years now, and in the beginning, I was drawn to it by, I guess I was in the very beginning, I just thought, that sounds interesting, don't know anything about it, let's see what that's about. And unfortunately in those days, it was just, you know, the meditation albums and things you would find, the resources would be just a bit woo-woo-ish. And it was big deal for me to find that there's an incredible amount of literature on the benefits of meditation. So I think my initial draw to it was, you know, what can this do for my mental space? I mean, you know, we take care of our bodies, how do we take care of our minds? So there better be a practice around that.
I know my initial draw was when Hitmon Lee learned meditation, and I thought, well,
really?
That's clearly a valuable skill.
That's interesting, because I certainly, when I was that age, looking at Pokemon, I was like, wow, that's it's got nothing to do with me. I'm not I'm not a Pokemon.
That was probably my first time actually.
That's really interesting
about it. I mean, I'm kind of joking around a little bit, but I guess as a kid I thought, oh well, you know, it makes, I can't remember, it gave him more attack or something.
Right.
So
that's very interesting.
It helps to, like, you as a kid you think, okay, it helps you in some way to, you know, perform better. Yeah. Anyway, I'll continue.
For me, I guess I was drawn into it by reasons, rationality, and so a big figure that helped me to take meditation seriously was Sam Harris, because, you know, he has a background in both neuroscience and philosophy, so that spoke to my background, and I thought, well, this is an incredibly clever science philosophy person who's dedicated so much of his life to becoming a great meditator, and now, I mean, his Waking Up app is, other than Google Maps, is my favorite app of all time. I think it just delivers so much value.
That's awesome.
And so I started, so he didn't have his app yet when I started. I think he had one meditation online called, I think, Looking for Your Head or Looking for the Self or something like that. So I did that, and then I read a book called Mindfulness by Jon Kabat-Zinn and followed his meditations for a while. The reason that I'm going into all of this is that my initial kind of foray into meditation was kind of rationally driven, and that took me to a certain place, especially with Sam Harris. He kind of, the way that he engages my linguistic rational mind. And a big step forward in terms of my progress in meditation came from a guy called Locke Kelly. And I want to give all credit to the meditation that I just led us through to Locke Kelly, L-O-C-H Kelly. And he has books that maybe we could share in the show notes or something like that at some point.
I feel like we really should get some affiliate links going with all these references.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. But Locke has a podcast of his own as well. But what was very important about Locke is that he enabled me to get into that place that I just mentioned about the default mind that has questions but does not look for linguistic answers. That just feels for what the answer is. You felt beauty and openness and warmth. And you felt those things. It's not as if you thought those things through. So Sam took me a certain way through of understanding maybe like the more intellectual side of meditation, and there are interesting intellectual things that you can do there. But to get to this other place of non-duality and rapture and bliss, Locke Kelly and his question, what is here now when there's no problem to solve? It just cut through my meditation practice in an I made a step change in the kinds of experiences that I had in meditation. And then importantly, I found that I could go there anytime that I wanted to. I didn't need to meditate for 10 minutes or an hour or something to get to a place. Mm. But I could in any moment ask, what is here now when there's no problem to solve? And go and drop straight into that place of rapture and bliss.
Now, can I ask, maybe this is very interesting and also maybe confusing, because it's like, I think it's natural to intellectualize things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And think, what's the benefit? So if I may ask that, what do you feel the benefit of dropping into that space is?
Yeah, so I think it's important that you pointed out that it's intellectualization is a trap. So that's why when you asked about can you kind of articulate what that place is, I went through this long-winded way of saying I'm trying to let go of articulation.
Yeah.
I guess for me, like,
we're doing a podcast, maybe we kind of have to articulate it.
So let me try. And as I said, there have been multiple attempts to like get at this thing. So one thing that comes...
I like what you say about, like, again, it could be a labeling thing where we love to label things because it helps us make sense of the world, but we can go overboard with that. Yeah,
labels are typically imprecise. We try to label people.
Yeah. And even this place, perhaps.
Yeah. That's why today's episode is simply called Here. No judgment, no label. Your question was what's the benefit of going to that place? So first of all, I think in episode 1 we talked about how we want to kind of confront truth. We want to know what the truth of the matter is and then live in accordance with that. I feel that this is getting these experiences has enabled me to get closer to what conscious experience is truly like. We don't typically do in our waking moments what we just did here. So there's a particular quality to conscious experience that can be brought out through meditative states that is special. So it kind of uncovers more of what consciousness is like. So, uncovering more truth, maybe you would call it. And then as I mentioned, I think that the more that you can get to that place, the more you find that it puts your problems into perspective. Locke Kelly talks about how, in a certain sense, your problems almost personify themselves. They announce themselves as having their own independent reality, that we then have to respect and solve. It's almost, he talks about, it's like almost you have a homunculus in your head that creates like a miniature representation of yourself in your head that announces itself as being true. It says, you need to solve this problem. And then part of your brain goes, okay, so I'm a problem solver and I need to solve those problems. So, you know, whenever you're engrossed within a problem, it can become so blinding. You can become so, what's the word? It's like, it's very confining. Yeah. And so but sometimes in those moments you can go, what the fuck am I doing? Like, it's sometimes easy to lose perspective in those moments. I think that this type of meditation is an easy way to get to the broadest possible perspective. You know, there's one way of getting broad perspectives, which is to intellectualize and to put it within the context of an intellectual, okay, like there is this problem, but then there's a broader sphere of broader problems. Or maybe you think about, I'm only this small little thing within a floating rock within the universe or whatever. So there are ways to intellectualize and to minimize and maybe to put your problems into perspective. But I feel that there's another way of doing that, which is not intellectual, which is to simply drop into that place of consciousness and to find that sometimes you don't necessarily need to always be solving problems. And when you're in that place, I find that you're a more kind and compassionate human to yourself and others. And when you operate from that place, your problems have a different quality. And the solutions that arise to you also have a different quality.
Nice.
So, yeah, the benefits are, I would say, are quite profound.
Yeah. Yeah, they're deeper and perhaps more subtle, but influential in many different things. In the sense of putting problems in perspective, I noticed one thing that works for me, which is perhaps counterintuitive, is to, if I feel I have a significant thing I gotta work through and it's uncomfortable and not something I want to be dealing with, by talking to other people and listening to them, like really listening to them as to what they're working on and going through.
Yeah.
I've had that a few times where I realized, in contrast, like my problem is really not a big deal. Like,
I see.
They might be going through something much more significant. So, yeah. But this is another way, even simpler.
Yeah, and it's good to also say that this is not a panacea. This cannot be used to solve all problems. Maybe somebody would make that claim.
Yeah.
I feel that this is part of a broader array of tools.
You still have to address the problems.
Still have to, yeah.
Yeah, but I think this helps you do so in from a good place, and like with the right spirit and intentions, right?
Yeah, I like what you said about kind of talking to other people about their problems, and I think one of the other benefits of that is that oftentimes we feel that we're alone with our problems. And as you know, one of the motivations for me in starting the podcast was to make some people that maybe think like us to feel less alone.
Yeah.
As if they belong to a community. It can be sometimes very stifling to think I'm the only person that's facing this problem and nobody understands me. I'm on my own. It's that is very isolating, and humans are social creatures and they don't want to feel isolated. So another benefit to expressing your problems is to feel less alone.
Yeah, and more understood as well. Yeah. I think to be truly understood, you have to, you just gotta be yourself and express what's important to you in those moments.
It's funny you talk about being understood, because I think that that's something that I struggled with for a while, just because I felt that I wasn't understood by people, even close friends. And then I realized what actually is more important to me is not that I feel understood, but that I feel allowed to simply be who I am. I feel that very strongly from you, that, I'm going to, be quiet for 6 months or whatever. You simply allowed that to happen. And I find that a good therapist does that as well, that they're not there to kind of pick you apart, but they're an open space that allows you to express whatever is there. In addition to that, you know, this idea that you can be understood implies that you're a thing that is unchanging. You know, so you can maybe understand somebody's motivations at one point in time, and then you come back 10 years later, it's a totally different person, you know. So what I've come to appreciate more than the feeling of being understood is simply the feeling of being allowed. That you're fine doing that, and I support you, and I see you. That you, not that you'd have to understand me, but because God knows we don't understand ourselves. I mean, it's very difficult to understand another person, but to simply allow space for them to express who they feel that they are in this moment is what a gift.
Yeah.
To simply listen deeply,
Yeah.
and to give them your presence.
Yeah. It's so simple, but it's so valuable.
I think you said recently that one of the most charismatic things you can do is to give somebody your full presence.
Yeah, exactly. Full attention. Yeah. Nick and I were joking just before this. We both put our phones on flight mode. And as I was doing it, I said to him, like, that's one of the most charismatic things you can do. I was thinking, well, being understood, to me, part of that would be you've put the effort in and the thoughtfulness in to think about that person and why they might do that thing. And so it's not like apathetic, because you could maybe accept someone and you just don't care. So, you know,
Yeah.
Which I would say is not like a great feeling. I wouldn't, you know, that would feel cold to me, you know. If
I
somebody did
understand. I see what you're saying.
Whereas other people that I feel they're thoughtful, they have considered how I might feel or why I might be doing something and accepting it too. Yeah, and I guess,
good point.
well, I guess they also, I think the really special people, they, like you said, they accept anything. Like anything I do, they'll accept it. Which is feels like a privilege as well, and not something I'd want to, you know, like I want to live up to that in a way, you know, like not that I act unnaturally or to try to please them, but I guess it ultimately, I think, like, they think I'm a person of character, living by my values, so I better continue doing that, even if the values change. You know, yeah, you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah, as it, you know, if I did not do that, perhaps I would think that's unacceptable, and hence, why would I think someone else? Yeah, but we all make mistakes too, so that's another beautiful thing when you do make mistakes, do the wrong thing, and people still accept you as a, you know, not as like a bad person or anything. They just accept it. I'm with you.
I like what you said about being thoughtful, because I find that you're very thoughtful. Like, you'll think about, you know, what I might like, and then you'll offer it. And I think it's, you know, it's thought that counts. Yeah. So I think you're right that, you know, acceptance plus thoughtful action is, very incredibly well received. A good basis for a strong relationship.
Yeah. I also made a note before. I was thinking of going, when you go into the in the here, when there are no problems to solve.
Yes.
I was thinking, well, what if you're like in pain, like physical pain, say you're unwell or something like that. So we can talk about that. But interestingly, like, I had the thought right after that, well, actually, I have done that.
Yeah.
So maybe 3 years ago, I had a kidney stone, and it was reasonably painful. But I found the most painful thing was when I got the stents. I had 2 stents in, and it was ridiculous, because you've got sort of something inside your body, and your body is it's foreign, so it's kind of trying to get rid of it, and I would just have these cramps deep inside my body.
Yeah.
and it was the most physically discomfort. I was in the most physical discomfort I've ever been in, and it was constant. You know, like it would pass and then it would come back. Anyway, so that was. I did look at it as like, this is a fantastic mental challenge right now, because this is ridiculous. And I also knew, you know, they're going to come out at a certain point, so it's temporary. But I remember I was down at the beach, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and so we walked there, which was kind of, you know, a little bit uncomfortable. And because, you know, at that point you kind of almost just want to lie there, not move a muscle, because it seemed to be the most comfortable thing to do. Anyway, she went for a swim and I just sat on the sand, and it was amazing, actually. So, you know, because I just felt like what's the word, you know, just depleted, and like I wanted to do physical things, but it was just clearly not a good idea, you know, and it was painful. So I just lay there, I watched the waves, I noticed some dolphins in the waves, and just all these things, and I was just like, it was really interesting, because I was like just enjoying all the beauty around me, and I was meditating without knowing it, I would say, in a way, and because that lasted for maybe a minute or something, and I just felt so good and so appreciative. And so that's pretty cool, in the sense that I mean, the kind of pain I was in, I guess it would come and go, but even in that moment, I was kind of, when I was in the present moment, I was still comfortable, you know, and blissful in a way. So how do you think that's possible for everyone? Because I also, similar to this, I was thinking of apologies, I don't remember his name, the concentration camp,
Okay, yeah, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
I thought so. Okay, I just don't have the confidence. Yeah, so I feel like this would probably be quite related to his thoughts in many ways, because he found he was able to maintain, would you say, like his peace and happiness in the worst of the like worst possible circumstance you could be in. Yeah. So what are your thoughts? Do you think even for someone in like immense physical pain, they can drop into this state? Because I was thinking that you said you can drop into it at any moment. I was imagining, well, it might be more difficult if you're in a really loud, busy, crazy place where you kind of have to be aware what's going on for your own safety, let's say, or if you're in just like extreme pain.
Yeah, I don't want to make any strong claims. I know that some meditation teachers do say that. When I went on a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and we would sit in meditation posture for I mean, it must have been at least 8 hours a day, probably like 10, and it's uncomfortable. And it gets excruciating, actually. It's like, it's funny, like you don't think about sitting cross-legged as being painful, but if you do it for 10 hours, it's incredibly painful. And so I couldn't really talk about it because silent meditation retreat, but I at one point realized, they know everybody in this room is in pain, and they know that this is happening. And so I found, yes, that pain can be an object of meditation. I want to also just extend my compassion to anybody that actually is in physical pain right now, or even mental pain. I understand that that's incredibly difficult, and so I don't want to make any strong claims about going to any place. This is something that is said in meditation circles, that you can get to a place where you simply observe it. Byron Katie says that...
Wow, you can observe the pain.
You can merely observe it without judging it.
Wow.
That's the place that I got to in this meditation retreat.
So and by judging, that would be like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
But instead you're saying you can have pain.
Pain is information.
Yeah, yeah.
So then you can go, well, it's not bad. And to simply observe it.
That's pretty amazing. That's so interesting, isn't it? Because even as a baby, I guess, you know, like pain makes you cry and you want to get out of it naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Byron Katie says that what we're afraid of when we're in pain is that it will continue. So you can bear it in the moment because you're bearing it.
Yeah.
But you're afraid that it'll continue.
Yeah.
So it's actually the expectation that leads to the suffering. The Buddha says that when you suffer, you're actually getting hit with 2 arrows. The first arrow is what the world gives you. So the world might give you pain. The second is that you choose to suffer. There's a choice. So to come back to Viktor Frankl, he says that an event happens and then you have a response. And in between those two is choice. And in that choice lies your freedom.
Yeah.
So again, let me extend my compassion to anybody that's feeling any immense physical or mental pain. I understand that that's incredibly difficult, and I'm not going to make any strong claims about meditation being a panacea that will get rid of that pain. But yes, there are these ideas that with the right perspective, suffering does not need to be necessary. Pain is just information. Suffering is when you create a story about that information and you languish.
Yeah. So an interesting thing about suffering is effectively it's your choice, right? And no matter what it is, you can make the choice not to suffer. I don't want to sound like you're saying
yes, uncompassionate.
Yeah, but I'm just examining the idea.
Yes.
And again, like, because Viktor Frankl's incredible how he went through that seemingly without suffering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you hear this a lot with those kind of survivors, that, you know, the people that go on and end up surviving are people that have an incredibly strong story. He also talks about how the people that had hope that they would get out would often talk about what they would do when they would get out. They had plans about, when I get out, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to start that business. I'm going to hold my grandchild. They had, actually, yesterday when we were talking about The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, at the end of the book, he talks about how myths or stories are necessary. You know, we talked about it in the first episode as well, about how in order to just structure the information that's coming in and therefore to act, we require stories. And he says that you need to create a myth that is generative, that is a myth of hope, that you create a story about what could be in the future, and then you take that on as a true hero. He actually in the end doesn't say that heroism is a bad thing. He kind of says that true heroism is when you go after a creative myth that's incredibly inspiring and hopeful, and you create like goodness in the world. And I think that
love that. That's just an exciting
exactly
prospect. I think that's the way to live, 100%.
But it's incredible how the power of those stories, right? Because there are people that are incredible so Nazi war camps is an excellent example of, there are people that are in incredible anguish, that have a strong enough myth that allows them to kind of survive and even thrive, to have a positive outcome. And he went on to create logotherapy, his own way of doing psychotherapy, as a result of this quote-unquote horrible thing that happened to him. And a lot of these people say that it was the best thing that ever happened. Wasn't there this guy, I think, what was that movie, 78 Hours or something, I can't remember what it was, but there was a guy that got kind of
120 something hours, I think.
Yeah, good.
Yes. Yeah.
So he got trapped and he had to like cut off his arm or whatever, but he said, he actually went on to say, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because humans have an incredible way with, some humans, I think this is a skill, but there is a potential
a learned skill.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It actually seems that for some of these people, they just have it, which is enviable.
I was going to ask, sorry for my ignorance, what was Viktor Frankl's, what was his job in that prior to the concentration
I don't know.
camps? Okay.
Yeah. Because
I'm curious if he was involved in psychology or something completely separate, and then he just had these realizations. Wouldn't
surprise me if that was the case, but Yeah, we create stories. And some of those stories are not great. So, like, for instance, we know about the hedonic treadmill, right? That you kind of get to a place of happiness and then you kind of stay at that place of happiness. And, so we know with lottery winners that it doesn't actually necessarily increase their happiness, their level of happiness.
In fact, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
But we also know on the flip
Temporarily,
side
yeah.
that, paraplegics will also go back to their default level of happiness. So something great can happen, something terrible can happen. And it's just, what is it? It's power of story, because in the world, there's no judgment in the world of this is good, this is bad. It's thinking that makes it so. And so what is that thinking? It's a story. It's a story about what's going on. And
Is
so
that Marcus?
No, I think actually thinking makes it so is Shakespeare, I believe.
Ah, okay.
There is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. I think that's Shakespeare.
Okay.
Potentially could be Marcus.
Okay.
Sounds like something he would say.
Yeah.
I love that we refer to him as Marcus.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Then if I may take another tangent.
Yes.
It was interesting to hear how you said that when we go to that place, the default state is not boredom, which, yeah, if you hadn't thought deeply, that's maybe what you would assume.
Or experience deeply. You don't need to think about it. Just go.
Yeah. Then, what is boredom? Yeah, let's start with that. What is boredom?
Boredom is a negative label that people put on empty space. You don't have to label it negatively when there's nothing going on in your mind.
Yeah. It's almost like the productive man would put that negative label on it because
Exactly.
he's trying to encourage productivity.
Exactly.
But even then, like, I'd say going to that place can be productive. I mean, no doubt, otherwise we wouldn't be talking
Or
about
do you even need to be productive,
Yeah.
But, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I think because of society, we need to be productive, you know what I mean? Like, we need
That's
to...
what I'm saying. I open by
True.
saying I extend my compassion to everybody because the world that we live in forces you to be productive merely to survive.
Yeah.
Nothing, and I'm not going to label that as being bad either. I'm not saying productivity is bad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that in the same way that sitting tightens your hip flexors, the constant focus on productivity causes you to become a problem solver.
Yeah.
Not saying that's bad again. Not bad to be a problem solver.
Yeah.
But it's good to have multiple ranges of motion in your joints, and it's good to have multiple ranges of motion in your mind.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. The boredom thing is interesting as well. In that I nowadays I rarely ever have it, because I think maybe that's just I naturally came upon that where if I had time with nothing, I would be like, wow, this is rare, this is and just trying to appreciate that.
One thing that I did want to bring up, I was going to maybe have this as a separate podcast, but let's talk about it now, is, as I mentioned, boredom is a negative label that we put on empty space. And I would say that procrastination is a negative label that we put on an activity that doesn't seem to be productive. But if you look at it this is the way that I look at procrastination. I think that when your mind is telling you that it wants to do something over another thing, you had better listen to it. Oftentimes when we procrastinate, it's because we're anxious. Oftentimes we feel overwhelmed with, oh my God, got so many things going on. And that's when we procrastinate. We procrastinate at exactly the worst time. So let's not judge that. Let's merely observe that and see what's going on from a totally psychological, neurobiological perspective of why does the human animal respond to anxiety with fucking around? And it might be that your mind is protecting you. As I said, your mind and your body are trying to help you. So that when you find that there's a path in your way that it seems insurmountable and overwhelming, that your brain protects you by saying like, okay, well, we're going to watch cat videos for a little while. So you could look at it in that way of like, it's your mind's way of automatically expressing compassion for you, in the same way that, you know, your mother might bake you cookies or something on a, you know, after a breakup or something like that. Your mind does that for you. So simply taking a step back and saying, why do I feel overwhelmed? You know, again, pain is a signal, and the urgency or the urge for procrastination is merely a signal. So what is it signaling? Well, maybe you're overwhelmed. And one way to be less overwhelmed is to look at what's in front of you and to break it down into its component
exactly
parts.
what I was going to say. Yeah.
You break it down, you write it down into, you know, whatever, 10 steps, and then you attack those 10 steps.
Break it down, and I'd say probably into the biggest chunk that you can do.
That you can handle, that you will actually do,
Yeah. And if that needs to be really small, then make it really small. Yeah.
And I would say budget time for procrastination. You're not a productivity, you're not a machine. You actually are a human. And so it's not a bad thing to take a break. Everybody needs a break. Everybody needs to sleep.
Pomodoros, baby.
Pomodoros is a good way of doing it. So you can structure it in a way. But my point here is that your strategy needs to come from a place of not judging yourself for this negative level of procrastination. It's merely it's merely part and parcel of the neurobiology of anxiety.
Yeah.
Your amygdala is telling you something.
So instead, let's figure out a method that works for you, in that harnesses that intentionally and then also helps reduce.
Yes.
I wanted to mention, because it's randomly thrown into the Pomodoro, just as a side note, that's just a method of staying focused, I would say. And typically it's 25 minutes of focused work on whatever it is you're doing, and then take a 5-minute break. And in that 5-minute break, it's doing something completely different just to let your mind reset. And it can help, instead of trying to slog through something for like an hour or two straight, just having those really brief breaks. It's just shown to help maintain that intense focus during the intentional focus time. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense as well in terms of that procrastination. If you think, well, in 25 minutes I get to rest for a little bit, I can just go for 25 minutes, as opposed to if you're just sitting there thinking, this is going to take me a long time, you know, how am I going to start? So.
And as Lachlan said, this is based on neuroscience. I mean, you can look into the experiments around your attention decrement. So for me, I did Pomodoros for a long time, and then I found that, well, actually I can probably spend more than 25 minutes now. I'm not saying that you should do that right away. I think 25 minutes is a good place to start, but what you'll find in the end is that you have your own natural rhythm. And the idea is that when you find that you're becoming distracted, to make space for that. It's not a weakness that you're beginning to lose focus. And you can train yourself in the way that you would train yourself for anything. To hold a plank or whatever, you might begin with 30 seconds, and then in 5-second increments you get stronger and stronger. So in the same way, you can begin with wherever you'd like to. 25 minutes is a great place to start. See if you can focus, and then take 5 minutes off. Personally, what I do in those 5 minutes is I go and take a walk. And I don't think about anything. I find myself drifting back to the problem during that walk, and I just allow myself, if that's what I want to do, that's fine. But sometimes I just try and be in the surrounds, look at the trees, look at the road, look at whatever is around you. And as Lachlan said, you kind of you switch activities to something that's totally unrelated. And what we found in the literature is that if you allow your attention decrement to continue to decrease, so let's say that you push past the 25 minutes, even though you feel your attention is waning, you force yourself. What happens is that you basically just go into a place of less and less focus, and the quality of the work that you do in that place of less and less focus is not going to be very high at all. So it's better to have a consistent practice around taking, I think that one of the papers around this is called brief and rare breaks, something like that, improves attention decrement. And so yeah, take 5 minutes every 25 minutes, see how that works for you. And what I personally found is that it just makes me more consistent. And I think that leeway leads to consistency, which leads to progress. And so if you can create systems for yourself such that it makes you more likely to be more consistent on more days, I think in the long run, you'll have better outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like self-acceptance and
Yep.
and not judging the if your attention's waning. The funny thought I'm having at the moment is I definitely think that's important to accept things, right? And in that sense be kind to yourself in that you're accepting this is how it is, and that's fine. I'm not judging that. But at the same time, I think there's probably a need to also strive for,
Yeah.
you know, like not, well, I need to rest every 5 minutes. So that, you know, if that's the case, that's the case, but let's strive to, you know, lengthen that out. You know what I mean? So, because maybe the ambition paired with the acceptance is important, I would say. Otherwise, one might accept a lot of subpar things and not grow.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So I think for my personal way of being, I would try and do that. Yeah, and I did the Pomodoro thing as well. I found it really helped me just jump in and get working and not procrastinate. But I have noticed there are periods when I just work relentlessly without a rest for hours, and I almost for me often the times it's the meal that gives me a break where I need to eat some food, so I go have some food. But even recently, actually, I've been so flat out working on the film is one example when there's just, and that was my take on all this. I totally understand when you were saying how procrastination is when you feel overwhelmed. There's so many things to do, you don't know how to do it, or even just something huge to do and you don't know how to approach that. For me with the film, especially because it was my first time doing all these things, and having like a small team and low budget, so I was doing many different roles at the same time. It was, yeah, certainly like looking at all at once was, you're like, what do I even start with? But for me, it was all about, okay, what's the highest priority? Let's break it down, and then having a list of all the things to do, and then just working through that list. And it got to a point when, you know, like I'm very hungry. I haven't eaten in a long time, so I'll get my meal. But there's just still so much to do that I'd be eating and still working through the list and not really resting. And it was okay, you know, like. I guess I always want to listen to myself if I need to rest, but I didn't need to. So, and then I see that as a growth thing as well. Like, cool, okay. I like this. Let's try and make this more normal when it needs to be, you know? Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the people that comes to mind for me is Usain Bolt. Just because I feel that he really embodies a really nice blend between intensity and, I don't know, self-acceptance, where this motherfucker's eating chicken nuggets and doing whatever he wants, and he's so chilled out. Like, you know, when he wins, he'll often like give a thumbs up to the... He is definitely, of everybody sprinting, having the most fun and taking himself the least seriously. So it works for him, you know, that there is this place of self-acceptance and goofiness, silliness and seriousness that blends. And I don't think that for him, you know, procrastination would be a negative thing. Got to push hard in some moments and then chill at other moments. And, you know, for a sprinter, that kind of thing's important. You keep running yourself down, eventually you're not going to be able to perform at your peak. So just from a performance standpoint, you know, it's best for the overall outcomes that you're a balanced person that is well rested, that has fun, and makes space for all of those things. which is why we begin our podcast with something ridiculous. Yeah. So man, I think it's interesting because I've come more and more to this idea that there isn't a need for a formal meditation practice. As I mentioned, for me the most special place you can get to is already natively there, and I feel that I see when you're totally engaged in your gymnastics practice, to me that's a mindfulness practice.
Yeah,
you're just totally focused in there, and hopefully you can get to a place where there's no you and just the activity. You're so focused that you let go of your self-consciousness.
In the moment of I feel like that's one thing I love about gymnastics. If you're doing a skill, you can't really think about anything except for the skill. You have to be present. If you're not present, you could really hurt yourself, I mean, so it's amazing in that way. Because you're using your whole body, you're often going upside down, and it's so delicate, the balance is so fine, or like the strength you need or the power or the speed. There's just so many things that you're subconsciously even doing or thinking about that you cannot be also thinking about other problems. And some sessions, when I have a lot going on, I find that harder to stop, to stop worrying about everything else and just focus on the training. But I do, and I love that. The synergy of it, where I'm getting exercise, I'm also getting often I can come into a session a bit stressed, and and in that sense I'm like, I just want to get back to working on what I'm working on, so I better get the session done. But then after the session I feel great, and that's cool because I've gotten the physical exercise, but I've also sort of helped reset my mind and put it in a good space amongst all the other, and just loving the sport and doing really cool stuff. So
So you that place of focus and flow is part and parcel of training and performing at a high level.
Definitely. So I have said that many times, training is my meditation. And that might be a good way for other people to look at it, that maybe, because it is hard to be like, I'm going to go sit down and do nothing. To make that time is difficult. I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe not for everyone, but definitely for me, I would find that. It was nice to package it in with training in a way.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I think that there is an important aspect to bringing it into your daily life. There is a trap with if you're meditating, 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day or an hour a day or whatever. I sometimes feel that there's a trap of thinking that this is the special place that needs to be, mentally speaking, you get to a special place in your meditation that needs to be kind of what's the word? Returned back to or continued into your daily, but sometimes that there is this huge juxtaposition between your meditation practice and your normal life. And I think that the kind of meta practice here is to blend those things such that you bring that presence into your everyday life. When I got back from this 10-day silent meditation retreat, it was incredibly difficult to reintegrate, because it was out in the Blue Mountains and it was so peaceful and quiet. And then I got back to Sydney, and if I'm honest, I was disgusted. Just the noise of it all, and the smoke, and the the clear air in the mountains is different to the air in the city. And something that you might find funny is there's also a sense that you're encouraged to kind of think that you're there alone. So one of the things that you might do is to not look other people in the face. So they also break these camps up into like, there's male quarters and female quarters. So by the end of these 10 days of intense focus, I hadn't seen my own face, I hadn't seen a face, and I hadn't seen a woman. And on that fucking 10th day, man, all these girls were like wearing yoga pants, and I saw a woman and I was like, what the fuck is that? It was just this creature, this majestic creature. And I was totally enraptured. It was hilarious. And I remember bumping into a friend. I bumped into a guy that was a friend of a friend. And he had the same experience of just like girls. And so it was funny because like we did this like incredibly spiritual thing for 10 days. And then we were like, oh, yoga pants, you know?
Yeah. I guess that's like a natural...
Yeah.
It's just a natural... deep part of humans, right?
Sure, yeah. So it was funny. And then, you know, we didn't eat meat as well during the thing. So the first thing I did was like got a burger, you know. So it was hilarious and I remember like these people, because you kind of debrief and everybody can now talk. It was hilarious as well because like the women's quarters, as soon as you could talk, was so loud.
Yeah.
And the guys' quarters, because everybody was kind of shy, was like it just started slowly and then eventually kind of ramped up. It's hilarious. But a lot of the guys that I was talking to were like, oh, I'm going to meditate an hour a day now. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm doubtful about that.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to reintegrate in that way. And so I was actually a little bit annoyed about the experience because like I didn't necessarily, like I had been meditating for 5 or 6 years at that point. And, you know, there were some insights that I got out of that. Definitely got out of that. But, and, you know, a few people... I've heard that people can have psychotic breaks on these things. For me, it's relatively easy to sit and be silent for 10 days, but I think that is hard for a lot of people, especially if they've never meditated. I wouldn't really recommend it. There are much easier and slower ways to get into meditation of like, you know, beginning with a minute a day or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You don't need to start with 10 days. And every day it's your job to meditate. So as I mentioned, I think it was probably like 10 hours a day we were meditating, something like that. So it's funny because like once I got back to society, I was like, well, that was a nice vacation, but it didn't really improve my meditation practice. And I felt that it was a little artificial to create this distance. I mean, because that life is so different from my normal waking life. So I think more and more I'm very grateful that I did an intense uptake of, you know, like a decade of just serious practice. But I think, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, did TM, I also think, for like 10 years. And then he's like, look, I got the point and I don't need to do it anymore. I feel similarly to that, that there isn't a need for formal practice. That place that we got to in the start of the podcast is accessible to anybody without training. And I think that's the ultimate goal. Yeah, it's been interesting to every now and then when I feel that I want to do it, I'll do it. You know, like sometimes I'll listen.
Formal meditation.
Yeah, formal, like 10 minutes or whatever, and I'll listen to Sam or Locke Kelly or somebody like that. But I don't feel the need for, especially because, you know, when I cleaned them this morning, I was washing my dishes and it was meditative practice.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to anything. I was there with the dishes.
Yeah. And
anything can become of that nature with the requisite focus.
Yeah. Man, it's funny. When I think I haven't done a 10-day meditation retreat. My meditation experience is very limited. You know, just to here and there. I found like yoga classes are kind of very meditative.
Definitely.
And not that I've done that many of them either, but to think of doing 10 days, that's very daunting to me, you know. And it's the funny thing is, because I think it's like, well, I do want to be productive, and I feel like, man, that would be, yeah, I think that's what it is, a bit of that, and then just, it's a long time. 10 days is a long time.
It is a long time.
Yeah, and I've just got to sit there all day, like.
Okay.
That seems very difficult for me.
Okay.
Which almost makes me think, well, actually, that's good because I like doing difficult things, but maybe the
sitting, man, is going to be brutal.
Yeah. Another thing I was thinking was, oh, did you have anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, I guess it. The meditation, like it's going to attract a certain kind of person. Like, not everybody's going to be attracted to 10 days of meditation. It's interesting to hear your perspective, because that's why I began our meditation in the way that I did, is because I think that an impediment to a lot of this stuff is the need to be productive. And again, it's like not labeling that as bad, but it's like also, the wider perspective of presence. They're just, let's just try and open up space for that as well. Because, for a while I thought about becoming a Buddhist monk, actually. And first of all, I've just heard stories of people, you hear about the successful stories of people who've been able to reintegrate into society, like Sam Harris and Andy Puddicombe, who he has the Headspace app. There are some amazing people that have done this journey of becoming a monk and then have been able to reintegrate into society.
Sorry for my ignorance, but do monks, is it only a temporary thing? It's not a whole life?
It depends. So in some monasteries, it's a lifelong commitment, and in others you make a commitment for, let's say, 3 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So these people, so what I was going to say is that there's a survivorship bias, because you hear about the successful stories, but there are many, many more unsuccessful stories of people that find it incredibly, I had that experience of 10 days and then coming back into society and feeling and having it be very alien. I was only away for 10 days and then feeling disgusted with modern life. So it was difficult for me to reintegrate. And so, I thought, the Buddha talks about how everybody has the potential for Buddhahood within them. And I felt, no, I don't think I want to totally give my life over to that thing. They also talk about the layperson. I mean, that's one of the great things in Buddhism, is that there's a path for if you want to become an enlightened being and be a monk and all that kind of thing. But then there's a path for just the everyday person. And it doesn't mean that if you're a farmer that you also can't be enlightened. So then I was like, I think I would rather just have a balance between being a meditative person and also, positively contributing to the world in some meaningful way. Having that, I don't necessarily want to call it a balance. I have an allergy to that word for some reason, because I don't want it to seem like a compromise. I think that one actually benefits the other. They benefit each other.
I was thinking, it's interesting that you were disgusted when you came back.
Yeah.
Because I like to try and find, I think I naturally do find the beauty in everything. Could you not find the exhaust smell, say, beautiful in some way?
Maybe it's just not what happened.
Yeah.
I was surprised too, because I thought that I would come back as an enlightened thing. And I think it was I have heard people talk about how it's important to reintegrate slowly, which makes sense. It was as you said, it's an extreme thing to not talk for 10 days and to sit and meditate for 10 days. So probably could have reintegrated a little slower. But I was surprised too that my initial thing was just disgust. Yeah. But it didn't last for very long.
Yeah. Do you think that would be different as well if you did it again?
I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Is that I wonder if that was I feel like that might just be dependent on where you're at the time. Maybe in life and things like that. You might have a different because what is the disgust is it what all the distractions and
it was
busyness?
So noisy, and I remember just feeling grimy, the buildings are less beautiful than trees, something like that. This is gross.
Interesting.
When you look out in the Blue Mountains, we would have lunch and I would literally there was no buildings, it was just beauty, the beauty of nature. So I guess the contrast of that to coming back into the city, I don't know, it's just gross.
Yeah, okay. I see the beauty in buildings. I see it in everything, man.
I think it was just the rapid contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you might have a totally different experience. And it's, you know, it's really, what's really interesting is where your mind goes when there's it can be challenging when you have when you're totally bored. You have those.
Hey, that's a negative label, dude.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying though. Like you can get to that.
But I do feel like I would be bored.
You get to a place of like anger, pain, suffering, anxiety, like worry about what's going on on the outside. What, like, if I'm not there to take care of problems, what will they become?
Yeah.
Like your mind goes to an incredibly strong place. There's so much resistance from just sitting. That's what I found.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because my initial response to the resistance was, fuck you. I'm gonna resist even harder. That if there's fear here, I'm gonna resist. I'm gonna fight fire with fire. And actually, what ended up happening on like maybe day 5 or 6 is I surrendered to it. I went, okay.
So it wasn't going away. Was it getting stronger or just?
Yeah, it gets stronger as you meditate. I think. Yeah, it would kind of go away when you know, as I said, you're not meditating all day, so you have lunch, breakfast, and you'll have a shower or something.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes away when you're engaged in activities, and then when you're back sitting, it comes back. And it gets louder as you meditate. So
at a certain point, you realized this is futile. I must accept this.
I suppose so. Like I don't know about futile. I was just trying different strategies, and then it kind of like dawned on me of like, what happens if you? Because my brain told me if you don't like, I don't know why, but I had this crazy thought of like, if you don't move now, because what happens when you sit is that you go numb, like you lose feeling in your body. So one of the stories was like, if you don't move now, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life. And another one was, if you don't speak or if you don't have stimulus, then you're going to go crazy.
Did you actually believe as these thoughts came in?
I don't know if I did. Like that voice is so, when you're not allowed to speak and you don't have any inputs, and you just have these negative voices in your mind, they get incredibly loud. So I think that there was always a place in me that disbelieved it, but it's difficult in the moment when that voice is really loud. So then it was really interesting because the turning point was, okay, then let me just be crazy. And let me just be numb for the rest of my life. Because what I realized is, like, I'm not the first person who has had these thoughts, and I'm also not the only person in this room. I'm sure that, you know, if it made you crazy, multiple people would have gone crazy, and if it made you paralyzed, multiple people would have been paralyzed. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna bet that this voice is incorrect, and that trust is what made the voice was then like, what the fuck. And it, like, oftentimes I hear people say that the voice tells you exactly what you don't want to hear. So like for me, my mind, you know, I'm an academic and, you know, whatever. So my mind is incredibly important to me. So then it was like, oh, if you lose your mind, you lose everything. And then I was like, okay, cool, let's lose everything. I just surrendered to it. And then I don't know what happened, but it kind of like disentangled, and it kind of, on the other side of that was like this joy. So it was really interesting, man, that like when you sit there with no inputs, you're confronted with some of your biggest demons. And I went through them, and it was very, very, so that was very cool. I don't want to do it again, but it was cool. Maybe I will. Maybe at some point in the future I will. But that was wonderful to confront the kind of demons in your mind, and then to go, okay, what do you got for me? And then to find that they have nothing. This is very wonderful. Yeah. This is actually, you know, so when the Buddha became enlightened, this is what was supposed to have happened to him. So the Mara, I I think the god of desire came to him, because the Buddha decided, I'm going to sit under this tree for 6 days until I'm enlightened, or actually forever until I'm enlightened. It took 6 days. And on that last day, Mara comes to him and tries to tempt him into moving, and scares him with all these things, demons come and blah, blah, blah. And then he simply touches the ground and he says, this is real, you're not real. And that's when all the arrows that Mara is firing at him, they turn into flowers. And that's his point of enlightenment. Saying that what's here now, knocking on the table or whatever, that's real. And then the stories that get put on top of that and labeled, those are not real, and those don't need to be believed. And from there he had this incredible enlightenment. And what's funny is that, like, after he had this, he didn't want to share it. Like, it's not that he was selfish, but he just didn't feel the need to talk about it, because I think that part of him felt that people were going to call him crazy. So he didn't automatically want to be a teacher. Eventually he was convinced to be a teacher. So it's funny that he kind of kept this to himself. But it was interesting for me to kind of read that enlightenment experience in the Buddha, because then I was like, well, that kind of maps onto the experience that I had. Not saying that I was enlightened, but I was actually on the 6th day, the same day. That's crazy. But my mind, it tried to get me to move, and it tried to get me to give in. And then, the answer was to surrender to it. And just go, okay, what do you got for me? Let's just see. And then to find that it was just stories and they weren't real. It was a pretty fascinating experience for me. Yeah, and I feel that maybe you could get there with, like, people who are ultra endurance athletes have similar self-talk, where they go to a place of immense pain and then they go, let's just see what happens if I keep pushing. And I bet that you've been in that place in your training as well, because you train damn hard.
Yeah, a really prominent example of that for me was when I was in Thailand. I was traveling in Asia and I had a shoulder injury in Bali. And I hadn't had it diagnosed properly, because I went to the hospital and they told me it wasn't broken, and I was like, yeah, I know. Anyway. So it turns out I think I it's like something with the bicep tendon, I think, came out of that groove, Yeah. Anyway, but at the time I didn't know. I just knew something was wrong. Anyway, and so I was in Thailand, and my friend and I had been planning to kayak between the PP Islands, which is pretty significant, like open ocean. and he had done it before, so I knew it was possible, and I loved the immensity of it and the ridiculousness of it. So anyway, to summarize it, we did it, and I did a little bit of paddling beforehand to make sure that my shoulder was okay, and the pulling motion was fine for my shoulder. It was more the pushing that was the problem. So I could kayak without pain, and I thought, okay, I'm good, I'll do this. But because of that injury, I was not my usual self of like going 100%, and we get to the day before, there'd been a monsoon, and we were actually in a longboat going between the islands when it hit, and it was insane. Like the rain would sting and you couldn't see anything, because it was just such heavy rain that you couldn't. It's like fog almost, and somehow the driver knew where to go, or the captain or sailor, whatever you want to call him. He knew where to get back to the other island. So we both were saying, okay, well, like when we're kayaking tomorrow, we're going to check, and if it looks like rain's coming, we'll go to turn back, because if we're out in the middle of the ocean when this happens, like that's very dangerous. Because we'll have no idea where we are. We could die easily. So we kayak from the beach out to the headland, which is probably like 1 or 2 k's maybe. And as I'm going, my buddy says to me, like, mate, you got to keep up with me. Like, you're going too slow, and we need to go fast if we're going to cross that in a safe amount of time, you know, because we probably wanted to cross in about an hour, given that's about how much time we assumed like we can see it coming, the monsoon, and we probably have about an hour, maybe less. So we want to make sure we cross quick, right? And I love that he was just being honest. Like, you got to be fast. You got to keep up with me. And I was like, yeah, man, don't worry, I'll do that. And so as we left the headland and just into the ocean, he was just powering ahead, and I had to force myself above my you have that natural cadence, you know, and that you would go at if you're just moving. Even like riding a bike, there's a certain speed you would comfortably cruise at, but he was going faster than that, and so I had to push above my, I guess that interesting, because it was a naturally assumed this is my level, you know, and I was intentionally pushing myself above that for an hour, or I'm not quite sure how long it took, but an hour or more. And I enjoyed the challenge. I relished it, because I was like, here we go, let's see, can we do this, you know? And then we get to the other side, and I am fine. Like, yeah, and then I just realized, oh, that's cool. Like, that was just the belief that like this is my regular speed is just it's a story in itself. Like, and no, you can go harder than that. So that was, in that moment I realized, yeah, like where I thought my level was is you can push above that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was pretty inspiring for me to think like, oh, I'm sure there's plenty of other, or probably everything actually that I'm doing. If I think like that's where I'm at, I could go harder than that, could go further than that. Yeah.
Breaking through stories, man, I feel like has been a theme across a lot of the episodes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it turns out you can do that through action or inaction.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just sitting around.
Yeah.
But yeah, to see, you know, to see what's really here. It's so funny how insidious stories are.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes
exactly.
they can, like as you said, they can be almost feel like hard limits. And you know, lactic acid is quite a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was so interesting. I love that though, because you can even try this on your bike as anyone.
Yes.
You're riding your bike, say if you do a regular trip, you know, I always ride to the gym, so, you know, do that same ride, but this time go just a bit faster the whole time and see what happens. And I'm pretty confident you'll get there and you'll be totally as if, you know, you won't be any more fatigued than you would have been had you gone at your regular pace. Which almost to me then, if you have the discipline to think, all right, well, I'm always going to go a bit faster, like that speed for a few weeks, then I'll up it again, and you know, I think you'll like continue to get stronger without even really putting in much more effort. You know, it's almost just expecting a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been really inspired. Like, one of the things that's been coming up for me recently is just thinking like, how much more hard can I work? And what are the self-imposed limitations that I have that are keeping me back? So I wonder what you think about, you know, when does that become too extreme? Yeah, this idea of working harder and harder. Yeah.
And you're not just talking physically, but mentally, like either. Any problem, like work.
So. I feel that those are actually pretty linked.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so I've heard some people say things like they worked so hard, let's say like on their job, so not a physical necessarily thing, but just mental and, you know, sitting in the chair kind of thing. And I've heard like they work so hard and they got physically sick from working so hard. And I guess that's where the pernicious story can come in, because you might think, oh, well, I better not work too hard or I'll get sick. I haven't had that happen to me before, so. But I'm at least aware of that, and I'm like, no, unless it happens to me,
okay,
I will not. I don't think I have that limit, you know, and I've done that. The film is another great example, because, you know, like I cared about it so much, and you have shoot days that you have to be prepared for, because if everything is not aligned on that day, then you don't get another chance. You just have to make do with what you have. And I was not willing to accept, subpar pretty much anywhere, so if something wasn't ready, I'm going to make it ready. And it would always end up meaning that I slept very few hours before a shoot date, and they'd be strung together, so it'd be like 3 days in a row of me getting 2-3 hours sleep a night, and on the day I want to be performing at my top, and it's a long day. It goes from like early morning to late evening, and I was aware, like, this is insane. This is the same time that I was having those feelings of like immense number of things to do and having to break it down to a list, and like I would never get to the end of my list, even though I would literally work as soon as I wake up on the film, working while I'm eating, and then I'm going to bed late because I still haven't got all the stuff done. But I was fine. Like, I got a good sleep after the shoot days. I didn't get sick. And so I haven't found my limit mentally, because I've had a few of these examples now where I've done things, and again, I really don't encourage people to lose sleep. Like, sleep is very important, but I think for me, if I'm not getting enough sleep, that's a sign that like this thing is intense, and like there's a time limit, and I'm just like making it happen before that time. And I guess you could plan better and get the sleep, but maybe I'm too optimistic, trying to keep doing the work I'm doing as well as the film, as well as training and whatever it is. Sometimes I cut back on the training, sadly to say, in those really intense moments. It's all priorities, right? But so in terms of the mental one, but I think I do, before I go to sleep, I typically just put on YouTube and just chill watching something, just to that's almost me just saying, good work, mate. Now you can just sort of relax for a minute before you sleep, even though sleeping is relaxing. But I don't know. I seem to always make the time for that, at least. And that's purely because I just feel like it, you know what I mean? And it feels like a little reward. But it's funny because then I'm like, but this is cutting into your sleep time. But even then, it still felt like, and I normally eat as well. I think that like those things just make me feel like, yeah, sweet, So I don't know if that's a great answer, but for the mental thing, I've never like really burnt myself out in the way of I can't do it tomorrow, or I'm physically sick. And with the physical side,
that's wonderful, man, because it sounds like you have built-in self-care practices that your face lights up when you talk about them, so you're not guilty about them at all, which is fantastic. I do something very similar, by the way. But it sounds like, mentally speaking, you haven't found your limit, which is quite exciting.
Maybe I should push harder.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think because it's just a natural thing for me, like what the task or what I'm trying to achieve is, give it all to that. So if that doesn't demand reducing sleep and cutting out other things, then of course I'll still do those other things. So I don't think I'd want to artificially try to find the limit. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. That's cool. And it's cool. It's natural, because I didn't really think about the until just now the watching YouTube or eating as a way to maintain. It just feels like the right thing to do. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Natural balance.
Yeah, and it's really simple. It's not like I'm having like these immense meals. It's probably terrible, because as well, like at that point it's like 3 or 4 a.m. The shops are all closed, so I'm just getting random things out of my cupboard, mixing some kind of meal together, but it's still satisfying, Yeah. Anyway, so the physical side, it's pretty simple. So I mentioned that kayaking thing. I think the other thing that pops into mind is injuries. So and I'm trying to think of injuries I've had, but most of them I would say they're like freak things, you know. Because I've torn my teres major, but that was just doing a swing out of a handstand in the rings, and I wouldn't say that's a really intense like strength thing, you know. I wasn't like doing weights and hurt myself. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I had pretty bad tendinopathy in my what's it called, coracobrachialis on both arms, which is like kind of under your bicep, and it's when you like adduct your arms,
okay,
so you pull them towards your body. I got that from doing the Azarian for stronger too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah, because I think I was feeling it a little bit, and then I just smashed out almost 3 Azarians in that video.
Okay.
So that was just clearly me pushing my body to its absolute like limit, and even then,
which was the goal.
Yeah, and even then that's okay, because it was just tendinopathy. Tendinopathy sucks, and it takes a while to get over, but you get over it. Yeah. So, but I think I think maybe this is relevant to the mental thing too. Is just listening to yourself and your body.
You seem to be good at that.
Yeah, like when I'm training, certain sessions I'll feel something's a little off on something. That's a bit tight today, or that something feels weird when I'm doing that movement, and then I think it's the awareness to say, all right, well, and the thinking big picture. Well, let's just ease on that one today. That's a shame, but I'll come back to it in a few days, and I'll hit it hard then, instead of trying to push through that and then maybe injuring myself. Now that's definitely not yeah. But you've really got to be attuned with yourself, I think, because you can maybe feel something, and then you don't want to make that an excuse as to stop. Because as a gymnast, I think every time, unfortunately, it seems most gymnasts have a bunch of pain issues that they just work through, and at some point you just accept, it's like, yep, that's just like that, and it's all good. It can handle it, you know. So because like some of my older injuries, I can feel tightness and things, but I know I can push through that a bit, you know. So it's not, you don't want to at the first point of something stop yourself, because then you very often not do anything, you know. Yeah. So I think it's listening to yourself, and then perhaps the experience as well of knowing what is, and that just comes from experimenting, I guess. You know. Yeah, but I mean, and on top of that, good coaches and researching is important, because obviously you can learn a lot from that, and then have your small experiments, as opposed to doing things that are reckless, I would say, in terms of how far can you push that, or, you know. Does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, one of the things that I've been doing recently is I've been putting Stronger 2 in the background during my workouts, and it's been interesting that on the one hand, definitely my workouts have, like, as I've told you, like, they're getting to, I'm getting stronger, and I'm pushing harder than I thought I could push. Nice. But actually, we didn't mention this yesterday, which is that yesterday I did like an upper body push workout with Stronger 2 in the background, and I felt that during a chest press on the left hand side, I felt something weird going on in my elbow. It wasn't painful, it was just weird.
Yeah.
And then I was like, don't be a pussy. And then I heard you say something like, if it feels weird, don't push it. It's not worth it, getting the risk of injury. So then it's wonderful that you seem to have this natural balance, and it feels that it's interesting that it doesn't feel like you've done it consciously. You just go, I'm in tune with my body. When it feels weird, I don't push. Sometimes you do, and then sometimes there's a freak accident that happens, but that happens to everybody. Actually reminds me about how, like, inside Japanese gymnastics, you spoke to this one guy who had never gotten an injury, and you asked him, well, how is it that you've been so fortunate in that way? And he basically said, when I come to do a skill or I execute a movement, I go fully into it and I fully concentrate. And he thought that by being fully present to what was happening and concentrating and not becoming, so the injuries happen when you're not lazy, but you lose focus.
Yeah, definitely.
You lose concentration.
Yeah.
That, it actually happened to me when so I only had one injury when I was training taekwondo, and it was my finger got dislocated, which was really annoying because it happened just before a piano exam. But what happened was I was sparring with a girl, and I was just like, well, you know, I'm clearly going to win. So I fucked around, and she kicked me, and I blocked it, and she kicked, and then so she kicked me, and I like basically dislocated my finger. And it was funny because like I didn't know what happened at first, and then, you know, the shooting pain. But that, in hindsight, I was like, you shouldn't have been fucking around. So yeah, it was very interesting to hear that, like, this guy that's never had an injury, he seems to never lose focus in his training.
Yeah.
That every movement requires this precise focus.
Yeah. Being in the here.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I agree. And it's interesting because if you talk to people that get injured, so often it's the silliest little thing that caused it, not actually, like they'll be doing all these crazy skills and then they'll just walk and slip off the floor at the end or something like that. More than you would think, that is what causes injuries, which is crazy. But then to defend it as well, like, when I say defend, I mean, even I think with great focus, although maybe if it was good enough, it wouldn't happen. But when I said like my bicep came off that, you know, the groove it runs from the shoulder, that happened in Bali, and I was doing front lever to back lever on a tree, on rings set up over a tree on the beach, and it was like a thick branch tree, and because of that, sort of the way the ring cable went over it was not quite normal. Like the physics of it was a bit different, I think, because it was a thicker tree, so the cables were wider, and then normally they sit half a meter apart, the rings, but maybe they weren't quite that, you know. Anyway, because I'd never trained at this tree before, but it was on the very last set I was pulling out of a back lever, and there was just a rip, and like before that I don't think I was feeling like some kind of tension that would indicate relax. And then also I was thinking Yard again, the guy that tore his bicep, doing I think he just slightly changed the position of his hands during like a planche hold, and we could ask him, but I is it a matter of hey man, did you feel anything, or were you really focused and listening, or because I imagine he could have been just doing a normal set, thinking about it all.
Yes.
And it's those scary things where you don't feel anything and it just happens. I wonder, we should ask him that, but from my memory, I wonder if I could have been more focused and sensed this and then avoided it. I'm not sure at the moment.
Yeah. So it seems like deep listening, listening to your body, having, being very connected to what you're feeling. Yeah. Again, this is very much in line with what we were talking about yesterday, cultivating your interiority.
Yeah.
And actually, what came up for me was thinking about how a midlife crisis is an injury of sorts. Where sometimes I feel that what happens there is that you didn't listen to yourself for so long. And eventually you go, but I have the house and the kids and the white picket fence, and what happened? You can't take it anymore. And eventually a mental injury does happen. And, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to my brother the other day about how with physical injuries, it's so obvious what needs to be, like, first of all, it's obvious when you roll your ankle. People go, well, you need a rest or whatever. But for mental injuries, because they're not visible, there's often very little to no rehab, very little to no sympathy for yourself and for other people. It's incredibly difficult to see mental scars. So in the same way that you gain that with physical domains, you need to gain an awareness of, like, does my shoulder feel weird? Does my elbow feel weird? To gain that kind of insight about, you know, why do I feel strange around this person? Or when I do this thing, why do I feel exhausted? Why do I feel anxious?
Why do I feel butterflies?
Why do I feel butterflies, you know?
That's it. I think that's always an awesome thing.
Yes.
Whatever's going on in that moment, that's special.
Butterflies, yeah. But to cultivate an awareness of, like, we were talking about the other day about how it is deep and difficult work to figure out. It's not trivial to figure out how you feel about something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's deep and difficult work to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah.
And so that what is here is not only what's happening outside. You know, oftentimes we think about, you know, with the child that's kind of looking out and trying to get an awareness of the world. It's actually only half of the world. You have a totally inner world, and it's important to cultivate a connection to that world as well. It's just
inner
that
world in your body and also your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're feeling, not just what you're seeing out there, but what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And yeah, those two things need to be harmonized. They're at least as important, and I would say that maybe the internal world is more important. Yeah, I mean, we know that circumstances matter less than mindset, for instance, in terms of one's life satisfaction.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say, tying back to the 10-day retreat, you mentioned one thing that your mind was telling you was like, well, all those things are going to, like, you know, you're not, all the things back in the real world need your attention, right? Or they're going to be chaotic or destroyed.
Yeah.
It's cool to hear you say that because, and I realized I've been to Burning Man twice, and in a way that's a meditation. Maybe I'm the informal meditator where, like I said, I had that experience when I was sitting at the beach, and I wasn't going there to meditate, it just happened. And then just me enjoying the beauty of the world randomly, somewhat meditating, training gymnastics, meditating. When I was at Burning Man, it's about a 10-day, 7 or 8 days long festival. I was thinking 10 days because of your retreat, but anyway, 7 or 8 days, so a significant period of time. And they have a lot of unique values, which we can talk about later, which is amazing. It makes it a very different existence. Kind of like how the retreat has these rules: you can't talk, don't look at other people's face, for example. With this Burning Man, they have it's just these values, and like it's like radical self-expression, basically accepting whoever is in front of you for what they are, and also trying to just be your authentic self. There's also no money, which is interesting how that changes things. And there's unconditional gifting, so people will just give you gifts, and that's it. Like, there's no barter. They don't expect anything. It's just they give you a gift, and that's amazing in terms of gratitude, because you just feel so much gratitude. Anyway, there's also typically, and this isn't even a rule, but it's just people respect it, is like you just don't take your phone. There's no reception out there anyway, but that is, it's cool, because I was like, all right, that's going to be really interesting, because I obviously use my phone every day, all the time, and it means that I cannot contact anyone, and I run my own business, so when you run your own business, as opposed to working for someone else, when you can say I'm going on leave and then just not worry about things, it's your business. So if you don't reply to the email or the text when there's a problem, like that could lead to, or your mind can make up all kinds of problems, like that could ruin the business and whatever. And so, but it was cool, because going into Burning Man, I was like, well, if that happens, that happens, and so we made the best plans we could, to tell people we're not going to be contactable. I'll try to prepare some things ahead of time, to get things like super ready for a week without me. And it was interesting for me, man, like, so you say when you came back to reality, it was you maybe should have weighted yourself in more. I feel like I adapt super quickly, and it doesn't really bother me anyway. So, because with the phone thing, for example, so I went from using my phone like a normal person to no phone at all, and I was instantly like, yeah, sweet, you know. Like I was curious, am I gonna miss it? Am I gonna be reaching for it? But not at all. Like I was just in the moment with people, enjoying it. But yeah, and that was also funny for me to hear you say you were sitting in silence, meditating, and thinking, all these things, they need my attention. They're gonna like, there's gonna be problems if I don't address them and just leave them. Yeah, I had that same kind of feeling maybe going into Burning Man, and maybe when I was there, like kind of every now and then, maybe I was thinking, well, I hope things are going smoothly out there. But yeah, there's probably, I guess, more distractions in that too. But I had that same feeling, and I just accepted it. And then what I found really interesting was when you come out of Burning Man and I turn my phone on, it's all good, you know. There's not really anything that's, you know, it's all good. People can wait. You know what I mean? Things can wait. Yeah, so that was cool, and I think I learnt some of those things you learnt from your meditation camp from Burning Man. Yeah, I also encourage people to go to Burning Man. It's incredibly unique experience. Yeah, and it's also it was interesting on that. I was when I went there the second time, I was really like, I'm keen to just like not have any plans and just go with it and journal. I wanted to journal every day. Yeah. And so it was very much about mindfulness and meditation in a sense, right? Like just being aware of how I'm feeling and in the moment and being here. That's absolutely what I was trying to do there. But there were so many interesting things happening that they themselves were overwhelming in a way, like almost distracting. And I didn't have much time to journal, which was crazy because I'd have to go out and make the time to journal, and then you know, it was funny because I was aware, like, I'm not really doing anything, but I'm still really busy. This is odd. Yeah.
You know, what comes up for me is like how people will sometimes say, well, it would be nice if there would be a society like that, but it's not sustainable. But I think it is. I think that's a self-limiting story, that people are fundamentally bad, and that if you give, they won't give anything in return.
Oh, right, the unconditional gifting.
Well, all of those, you know, it would be nice, you know, imagine if Burning Man wasn't this one-off rare experience, but was something more commonplace. And imagine if you would have a society like that. And I think, you know, basically the argument back is like, well, that would be nice, but that's not how people act. And my feeling is that actually by default that is how people are. Maybe that's naive, but
I think you're right. Yeah.
As we found in the beginning of this podcast, the default position is lovely. And if we could live from that place, I think more often, I think it could have pretty, like, not just, again, it's for the benefit of not just yourself, but for the benefit of all beings. You know, imagine a society based in that place. It's a free place that anybody can go to at any point. So imagine if everybody lived from there, how much less we feel that we need, and therefore how much less productive we feel we need to be.
Yeah, it's funny that to be vulnerable with you, like, I feel uncomfortable about that.
Yep.
Something about the almost how you said about pain. It's the expectation that, like, knowing that this thing is a certain length, I'm comfortable to return to my normal life after. If that was indefinite, I feel like I'd be uncomfortable about that. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I also wonder if, like, if it's like I can keep up that facade for a week.
But that's the thing. It need not be a facade if that becomes the natural state.
And I'm not even saying it was a facade. Like, as in, I
understand.
I was trying to, you know, just feel it and be authentic. But I wonder if it was prolonged, if that would change that.
This is what I'm getting at. That there's a feeling that there's something you even used the word facade, but there's a feeling that there's that is somehow not realistic. And maybe I'm just thinking, let's see if we can challenge that.
Yeah. No, and I'm not saying we can't. It's just, yeah, interesting to think about. I'll need to think deeper on it to have more useful things to say, I'd say.
Good. Well, that might be a good place to wrap up then. What do you think?
Yeah.
Good. So, again, everybody that's listening, thank you so much for your time and attention. And till next time, see what's here now when there's no problem to solve.